All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome back to Caravan to Midnight Mr. Peter Kirby. We're going to discuss a variety of things. Let me tell you a little bit about Peter, though. He's the author of the book Chemtrails Exposed, a New Manhattan Project, and he's a staff writer at activistpost.com. He's a San Rafael, California researcher, writer, and activist. He graduated from Lick Wilmerding High School in San Fran and went on to study radio, television, and film at Cal State Long Beach and San Francisco State. He drives a cab to make ends meet, but would like to be a professional writer. And I'll tell you, that's one of the best jobs you could possibly have. You never know who's going to get in that cab. You really don't. It's an amazing way to meet people. If you have a little time to chat, you never know. You might have you may have somebody that's, I'm on my way to a meeting with the CERN scientists right there in the back seat, so you never know. But without further ado, Peter Kirby, welcome back to the program. Thanks for coming on. Good to see you.
Hey, thanks for having me, John. It's a pleasure to be here again.
You know, we talked about a bunch of interesting stuff the last time that you were here. We even mixed it up a little bit with the Nazis. And as I was looking at this, and folks, before we got started, I said, and he was reading my mind, and he said, this is all new stuff. No one, who's this guy? This Hans Dolezalek, or Dolezalek. We'll get into that. Okay, good. He's still alive. Who? Hans? Yeah. Really? Yeah, he's like 100 or something. Really? Yeah, really. So, and it's interesting that he decided to come on because just this morning I saw this massive grouping, a setting, a sky setting of chemtrails and so forth. And I want to ask him something on that when we get started, which we're going to do on the count of one. One. Hey, Peter, have they improved the stuff that or modified it to where it behaves slightly differently in the stuff they're spraying in the air? It used to hang around forever and ever. Now, it seems to dissipate a little quicker. Do you observe this, or maybe this is just a one-off? You know, there are plenty of pictures from the World War II days of 17s and 24s up at altitude, the big bombers, with these contrails coming off of them, and they stayed in the sky for quite a long time. They just didn't stay in the sky as long as chemtrails did, you know, as recently as 2-3 years ago. But I don't see them as often. And again, they don't seem to hang around in the air as long. Has something changed?
Not that I know of. My go-to information on what it is that they're spraying us with is the work of Dr. Marvin J. Herndon, a world-famous PhD scientist who has published multiple peer-reviewed journal papers talking about how we're being sprayed with coal fly ash. He has scientifically determined this, and I have not seen any difference in the sprays. I haven't observed anything different. Maybe you have, but I haven't, and I have not seen Marvin Herndon voicing anything about any difference in the sprays. I think it would be quite an ordeal for them to change what it is they're spraying because of, you know, all the equipment is made for this coal fly ash that they're spraying us with. And as far as the, you know, the older planes spraying things, be they jets or propeller-driven planes, if you're looking at some old footage of planes that leave lines in the sky, that could be absolutely anything. I mean, you know, they've been spraying things out of planes for numerous reasons for a long time, since before World War II. It mostly started snowballing after World War II. But, you know, these planes could be fitted with things that spray stuff. Or in the case of propeller-driven aircraft, it could be oil burning. You know, you see these things where, you know, people want to debunk chemtrails and they say, oh, look, here's 1957. And these planes are leaving long trains, long trails. So, you know, that means that, you know, planes have always left these things. Well, yeah, if they're spraying stuff, they've always left these things, you know. So there's a grand history of them spraying us with whatever they want, whenever they want. So these old films and old pictures of these planes spraying things, yeah, they could, or you know, supposedly not spraying things, they could very well be actually spraying things, you know, without any provenance is how it's usually presented. So we really don't know what that is.
Fly ash. Why fly ash?
Well, it appears that there's a whole, I would assume that there's already a whole body of scientific study that has been done pertaining to airborne coal fly ash and how it's manipulated in the air. This is due to the fact that when coal fly ash is taken out of the exhaust from coal-fired power plants, they use what are called electrostatic precipitators, which use electrostatic energy to move the coal ash and collect it and take it away. So I'm assuming, this has been one of my big finds. Dresser Industries plays into that. I guess I'll go into that right after this. But, I'm assuming that there's a big body of scientific work behind it. You can trace the whole history of the atmospheric manipulation of vaporized substances back 100 years to Oliver Lodge, and even before then. This guy, Oliver Lodge, he first started building machines for industrial purposes that would gather. It was called not electrostatic. It was called I think it was called electrical precipitation. And you find that if you have just a wire, an unsheathed wire that has a charge running through it, particles just tend to gravitate towards the wire and collect on the wire. So he knew about this, and his area of study was this, and he developed machines or devices that could capture the vaporized substances as they arose from such substances as tin, lead, even gold. And so you could see how these are valuable substances. So he made devices that would capture this. When you let's say you had to melt some tin, some of it vaporizes, or melt some gold, some of it vaporizes. You want to capture that. So he developed machines with his company that were able to capture this, and also it was a win-win because it made the air clearer around the industrial plants. There was less pollution. And so he went on to develop these electrostatic precipitators, or at least the companies that he founded went on to develop these electrostatic precipitators that are now collecting the coal fly ash off of the coal-fired power plants. And Dresser Industries has been the leader in this field. Around the world, you will find these giant electrostatic precipitators collecting the coal fly ash produced from coal-fired power plants, and a lot of them are made by Dresser Industries. Dresser Industries was the company that evolved out of Lodge's work and Lodge's companies. Lodge eventually hooked up with someone with the last name of Cottrell, and Lodge Cottrell was their big endeavor, and then it eventually became Dresser Industries. I'm forgetting the whole story of it, but the details of it are in my paper, and that's why I'm here today, is because I have a new paper out called Chemtrails Exposed, the Deep State and the New Manhattan Project, now running on Activist Post. And actually, I wrote a separate paper about the whole Dresser thing. I touch on the Dresser thing in the Deep State and the New Manhattan Project, but I wrote a separate paper about a week before just about the Dresser stuff, because the Bush family bank bought Dresser Industries in 1928. And Prescott Bush, old granddaddy Bush, personally handled the transaction along with another man, I forget who it was. Not only that, Prescott Bush handed his interest in Dresser Industries, which he acquired during the transaction, he handed it down to his son, Bush Sr. So we know that Bush Sr. ended up with an interest in Dresser Industries. And, so Dresser Industries is out there collecting the coal fly ash, right? Nice, fresh coal fly ash. Isn't that what you want? And don't you figure that Dresser Industries is not only going to be making the machines, they're going to be installing them, and they're probably going to be doing maintenance on the machines. And you can probably assume that, I'm extending a little bit here, but I know how things work. If you build a machine, people are a big complex machine, people are going to expect that you're going to be taking care of it. They don't know how this machine works. Dresser Industries knows how this machine works. So it's probably been, and to this day, it is probably Dresser Industries' job to come and collect the coal fly ash out of these electrostatic precipitators. So, wouldn't that be the best source of coal fly ash? And we know about the Bush family, right? I mean, I don't think I have to tell you about what the Bush family does. I don't think they would have any qualms whatsoever about providing the chemtrail sprayers with fresh coal fly ash to spray all over us.
Peter, it's okay with me if you go on and if you embellish a little bit about some of the things that the Bush family has done. By the way, folks, fly ash is a byproduct of coal, which itself is full of heavy metals and toxins that can be dangerous. Concern has been raised that buildings made from fly ash concrete could be harmful to people. The safety of fly ash and concrete has been hotly debated. And there are a number of links here, potential hazards of fly ash and how fly ash concrete works and so forth. But what about the Bush family? We know that Prescott was the Nazi banker. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. Talk about a dynasty. The Bush family pretty much was a dynasty, and not a very nice one.
Oh, it goes back to even Prescott Bush's father. Prescott Bush's father was a big deal guy for the government who was procuring arms for World War I. Yeah, I mean, the Bush family is absolutely incredible. I mean, we have documented examples of the Bush family. I just rattle off a whole bunch of stuff in one of the paragraphs in the article. I'm reading it right now. I mean, we have the Bush family involved in depopulation and eugenics, mind control, media manipulations, weapons trafficking, drug trafficking, money laundering, the CIA, the CFR, the Nazis and their death camps, Enron, secret societies, the New World Order, bioweapons, overthrowing governments, assassination plots, and it just goes on and on and on. I mean, to see this stuff on TV about, how great Bush Sr. was and stuff, I mean, it kind of makes me sick. I mean, it's just absolutely unbelievable. They just present this idea that nobody can say anything bad about the guy now because Trump, basically, I think is the deal. Like, everything, the whole world is supposed to be aligned against Trump, and if you're not Trump, you're good. You could be he was. If you ask me, Bush Sr. is just pure evil. His son, I don't know, he's probably pure evil, but at least he seems to have a sense of humor about himself. I mean, Bush Sr. I mean, he's even been implicated in things that just the dirtiest things that you could possibly imagine. Talking about the Franklin cover-up and things like that. I mean, to venerate this guy the way they've done in the mainstream media is just disgusting.
Yeah, it really is. I'm looking at this thing here. Earth's ecosystems are on a collision course with extinction. Insect populations have declined by up to 98% in some areas of the world. Michael Snyder published that one in End of the American Dream. And what I'm thinking is, I wonder if this fly ash is contributing to the reduction in insect population.
John, you're right on it. You're right. Let me stop you right there, because there was something that I omitted from the article in Dresser that I probably should have added. When I was looking over the Dresser website, I should have looked into it some more, and I should have put it in the article. But they had a web page, and it had a little box for it and a little picture and a little headline, and it said, "We care about the bees. Look what Dresser Industry is doing for the bees." It's like, you care about the bees. What do the bees have to do with Dresser Industries? Well, if the coal fly ash is killing the bees, well, then they would know all about it, wouldn't they?
Bastardi, a bunch of them. I wonder if the object is to totally pulverize these third world countries and send them to our country so that this country will then be destabilized, and boom. The solution is waiting. I suspect it's a pretty ugly one. And Peter, I don't get pulled into this woo-woo stuff very easily. Somebody contacted me recently saying she's going to stay with me till May. After that, we'll see. But she seems to have the idea, bless her, that I'm not interested in people identifying themselves as targeted individuals. Nothing could be farther from the truth. I am interested in anything that is truthful, and particularly things that are nefarious, and the evidence regarding these nefarious activities is in fact true. So, but you know, you don't run into targeted individuals every day unless they reach out to you. You've only got somebody else's word for it. The reason that I'm wandering around like this is that I started off the program with the statement, not before you came on. The net is absolutely awash in headlines. All of them are potentially alarming. And also that I subscribe to several left-leaning newsletters. I don't use my real name, of course. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't send it to me. But if they knew who I was, which that's up in the air too. But why risk it? Uncle Dan, you know, Gmail, something like that. That's not me, but I'm just making it up on the fly. The point is that their facts, the real facts, and the facts, even on the right side of the line, as opposed to the left side of the line, continual contradiction. And you just can't, it's difficult to get a straight answer on anything. It really is. Anyway, we're a little bit far afield, but yeah, I thought when you mentioned fly ash, and then I looked into it, and then I remembered that article, I thought, I wonder, and you just said it, the bees. Yeah, without the bees, whatever area in the world we're talking about that normally grows things you can eat, if there are no bees, you're not going to be eating very much.
Yes, and this is another area that I'm going to look into. Since we do know that it is coal fly ash, and coal-fired power plants have been pumping this stuff out for 100 years now, plus, you can pretty much bet that there's going to be a whole body of scientific evidence pertaining to the environmental impacts of coal fly ash. I just saw a story in the press not too long ago how somewhere in China, they don't care about electrostatic precipitators and pumping all this garbage into the atmosphere. When around the coal-fired power plants in China, just everything is just dead. I mean, people just die. And it's like you're going back to the Middle Ages where people don't live past 37 years old, and just everything is just coated in, this coal fly ash everywhere. But you can bet that, the evidence showing the destructive properties of coal fly ash has been very well documented. There was probably a lot of evidence for this that was presented back in the 70s when they created the EPA, when the EPA mandated that all coal fly ash be removed from the smokestacks of coal-fired power plants, that there must be a huge body of evidence pertaining to the exact ramifications of what happens when you just spew coal fly ash out everywhere. So I'm going to be looking into that, and we can take that evidence and pretty much figure that that's what we're looking at when we're talking about the New Manhattan Project and these planes that are spraying us with coal fly ash today.
Well. I've been getting into my Solzhenitsyn here. Someone who remained anonymous sent me a collection of books that all focus on communism and so forth, and global communism in particular, which of course has always been the dream. And socialism is just the lightest form of communism. I've said it for a long time. It's just communism light, nothing more. It's communism without the AK. But then there's the Nazi component. And by way of a bunch of contradictions here, Joseph Stalin was a lunatic, there's no doubt about it. Just a bloodthirsty, power-crazed man. Still, after World War II, we did stab Russia in the back. We would not have won World War II without the Red Army. I just don't believe it. Mm-hmm. I mean, unless we were popping off nuclear devices all over the place. That said, it appears that we installed in Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia nuclear weapons right after the war. So all of these programs that we've learned about were much farther along than anybody thought. You can make one bomb and it works. How hard is it to make 10? Not, right?
Mm. Yeah.
So what about the Nazi component, other than Prescott Bush running a bank in America for him, and IBM doing business for him, and Henry Ford being sympathetic to him, as well as I understand Charles Lindbergh had a little bit of sympathy for him as well.
Oh,
Our
yeah.
sympathy is between our deep state, which obviously is CIA, and under them, FBI, between our deep state, the Soviet deep state, and the Nazi deep state, because it looks to me like everybody was working together on some level then, just not the people out in the field with their rifles, but at the upper levels of government. Oh, yeah, they were all working together, and it appears that they're working together still. There may not be as many self-identified Nazis around, but the influence was quite widespread. Didn't you find through your research?
Oh, yeah. I mean, pretty much everything that has been presented to us in the corporate mainstream media is a lie. They've been showing their colors lately a lot. They've been showing their true colors. I mean, anybody who has an objective mind can see how absolutely unhinged the mainstream media has become. They've taken off the mask. They were able to get away with all their manipulations for just decades and decades and decades. And now finally, the American people have risen up and the grassroots has become awakened, be it that somebody's a Trump supporter or a Bernie supporter or a myriad of other candidates. The grassroots is awake and the people aren't having it. They're pissed. And they aren't just, sitting back and just figuring that, the reporters are going to do their job. They go get stories and, then they sell advertisement and, that's how they make their money. So they always want to get the best stories and, expose all this stuff. No, I mean, they're in fact, in particular, it's been the CIA manipulating this stuff. They know very well that you can get away with anything just as long as the public thinks that there's nothing wrong that's going on. And they know that you create enemies. You say, oh, here's the Soviets over here. They're the bad guys. This was the big Cold War thing of the 50s. And they say, oh, the Soviets are over here and, we're the good guys over here. And then, so that's just the way it is. The more you look into it, the more you realize that Russia has never even really been that much of a threat to America, if at all. And you find that these Operation Paperclip Nazis that went into intelligence after World War II, they've been playing all that stuff up. That was their bread and butter. That was how they made money. That was how they got paid. Because they were supposed to be the experts on Soviet capabilities. I mean, maybe they were. In fact, the evidence shows that they were quite well versed in what the Soviets had during World War II, and that we wanted to know what the Soviets were doing. It was a little bit difficult for our people to get in there, apparently. So we largely relied upon the German reports as to the Soviet capabilities during and after World War II, and the Operation Paperclip Nazis that were providing these reports to American intelligence. They learned very quickly that the more that they say the Soviets are a threat, watch out, you got to do this, you got to do that, and the other thing, that gave them more power. That gave them more money. So the more they played that up, the more powerful they became. That was really the driving force behind all the propaganda during the Cold War that said that Russia was the bad guys.
Isn't that something? Now, among others, Willie Messerschmitt and Reinhard Gehlen and a lot of people, a lot of high-level Nazi operators, if not, by rank, by department. A lot of our stuff. I mean, it's just amazing. Our B-2 stealth bomber, that thing looks just like the Horton brothers HO-9, symbolized with an IX, the Roman numeral 9. And I mean, it looks just like it. They had a flying wing, and I think this thing was built or designed in 1936 or 7. And they actually made a replica of it, and it had a lower radar signature than even the modern B-2 stealth bomber. Ridiculous. F-86 Sabre jet, that's a Willie Messerschmitt design. Kurt Tanker Focke-Wulf, he built down in South America what became known later as the MiG-15 and 17 and 19 and all of that. So there's lots and lots of crossover. But what about Werner von Braun, the famous V2, and I guess he designed the V1 buzz bomb too, didn't he? The V2 rocket. The
V1, the V2. He went on to design other rockets that launched. He designed the rocket that launched the first satellite. He just designed the rocket that launched the first U.S. satellite. He designed rockets that did atmospheric soundings. This was a way to map the auroral electrojet, which has a tremendous effect upon the weather. He also designed, or was one of the key guys in designing the Saturn rockets that were designed to send us to the moon. But his real importance, I think, in this whole thing is that he was a political leader of the Operation Paperclip Nazis. He represented them. You know, there was let's see here, I could find the number, 120. Von Braun handpicked 120 Operation Paperclip scientists, and that there were other ones that came in as well. But he lived with them when they first went to what was it? They went to White Sands. The first place they went was, I'm trying to find it here. They went to 3 different places. They first came in and went to I'm drawing a blank, but then they went to White Sands, and they went to Huntsville, Alabama. They traveled around a little bit over the years, early on, immediately after World War II, and they all traveled together, and he was their leader, and he represented them, and he was their leader in one of the leaders in the scientific aspects of the development of the rockets as well. Not only that, I have some evidence of von Braun being responsible for, or at least in part responsible for, the first weather satellites that the United States produced. In the definitive biography of von Braun by Neufeld, he writes that von Braun was interested in the atmospheric sciences, and right after that, they started developing the, I believe it was the Tyros weather satellite, the first dedicated weather satellite. So, he looks like somebody very instrumental in all this. He was very driven. He was charismatic, apparently. Neufeld writes, when the Defense Department made it clear in early 1958 that space reconnaissance was an Air Force mission, a typically inventive von Braun told an RCA engineer, quote, "Let's look at clouds." The Army RCA proposal evolved into a weather satellite project that later went to NASA as Tyros. Tyros was the first line of American weather satellites dedicated to weather observation. And I think it's important also that we note that when Eisenhower was pressed on the question as to what he meant when he talked about the dangers of the military-industrial complex, like who in particular, he said Edward Teller and Werner von Braun. But von Braun wasn't the only one. There was plenty of other Operation Paperclip Nazis that were involved in the atmospheric sciences. I've covered in previous papers Martin Schilling and Kurt DeBoost. That was someone that we talked about in the previous interview. But then there's some other ones here that I'm looking at. But let's talk about Dol Zalek. This is the most interesting of the Operation Paperclip Nazi scientists that I've been able to uncover. He was a distinguished German meteorologist during World War II. He was also a member of the Brown Shirts. We don't know how if he did any bad stuff. I have no evidence of him doing any bad stuff during the war. Most of the scientists didn't do the worst stuff. I mean, the worst stuff was like Klaus Barbie and, the guys who were out there shooting people in the head all the time. The researchers and the scientists were mostly not into that type of stuff, unless you're, Joseph Mengele, was, involved in human experimentation. But the rocket scientists, by and large, we're not the worst offenders as far as all the violence of World War II is concerned. I think we should note that. But anyway, Dolezalek is apparently still alive, and he was brought into the United States in 1958. This was after the supposed deadline for when Operation Paperclip Nazis were supposed to have stopped coming in. That deadline was in 1948, but there was an exception made for Dolezalek in 1958, and so that he came into America to attend a major meteorological conference, and he subsequently accepted a job with something called the Aviation Corporation of Wilmington, Massachusetts. This was in 1985. So there was some time in between there, but he got the job at Avco right after. But then later in 1985, Avco was acquired by a company called Textron. A lot of people have heard of Textron.
Oh, yeah.
And when Textron acquired Avco, Textron nearly doubled in size. So I guess they got Dolezalek along with the acquisition. And Avco became a division of Textron, known as the Textron Defense Systems, and then it evolved into another division of Textron. This is all in the paper here, and you can find all this on Textron's website. And there was another Operation Paperclip Nazi who went into Textron. That was Walter Dornberger, who was von Braun's mentor, another developer of the V2. So this company, Textron, looks very interesting in all of this.
Textron.
Textron.
As in the helicopter Textron.
I believe so, yes.
As in the V-22 Osprey tilt rotor aircraft they've been working on since the 50s. That Textron. Gotcha.
Yes, and there's also quite a bit of evidence for Dolezalek working extensively in the vein of the New Manhattan Project. He worked extensively in the field of atmospheric electricity. There's a book available, I believe it's on Amazon, that he edited. It was a series of papers, I believe, or it was something about one of their annual meetings. There's an organization pertaining to atmospheric electricity, and they produced their annual report for their annual meeting, and it was edited by Dolezalek one year, and that's available on Amazon, I believe. So, he's obviously done a lot of work in the atmospheric sciences. Yeah.
Now, about this new Manhattan Project. If the first Manhattan Project was to split an atom and cause a nuclear detonation, what's the new Manhattan Project about? Electrifying certain areas of the face of the earth and just frying the inhabitants to little crisps, or what do we think it is? Nothing would surprise me.
Well, at this time, I'm sticking to weather control. I'm trying to dumb it down a little bit. I understand there's lots of other things going on, and these devices that they're using in the course of weather control have many other applications. But my definition of the New Manhattan Project is this global weather modification project that uses not only substances sprayed from planes, but also electromagnetic energy. And but as far as the whole atomic energy connection is concerned, I found a very interesting report from this was 1946. It was a very early report. It was called War and Weather. It was part of a series of reports called Toward New Horizons, and it spoke to a broad overhaul of U.S. military air operations. That if this might be reminding you of the Owning the Weather in 2025 report, which was one in a series of documents called Air Force 2025, which also spoke to a broad overhaul of U.S. military Air Force operations. That one came out in 1996, I believe, but the one that I'm talking, the older one, Toward New Horizons, with the report War and Weather, came out in 1946, right after the war, and they have a very interesting passage near the end of this War and Weather report. They say sort of generically, they say that atomic energy may be used to control the weather. Now, this is interesting because we know Teller and other Manhattan Project scientists had said that maybe detonating atomic bombs in the atmosphere could have an effect upon the weather. And that was quite a popular thing going on. But that's a specific use of atomic energy. In this one, they just say atomic energy. So that could mean anything. That could mean, let's see here. That could mean simple electricity, loosely applied, which is technically subatomic. But atomic energy applies to anything that has to do with molecular physics. So it could also apply to the use of electromagnetic energy to control the weather. And they're just kind of throwing it out there without any explanation. And then they finish up in this War and Weather report saying that, quote, it is conceivable that the peacetime applications of such concepts may be more significant than their military uses. So, yeah, so they're talking about using atomic energy to control the weather during peacetime. So I think they're talking about the new Manhattan Project here.
It sounds like it. Yeah. I think you're. I think you're close. I really do. Wow, stunning.
And then this also may be how the project could have been stored. I've been thinking about this for a long time. It could have been tucked into the Atomic Energy Commission. If they considered the use of electromagnetic energy to control the weather as something that's atomic energy, such as they state in this report, then you can put that under the Atomic Energy Commission, couldn't you? It's very secret, very powerful, lots of money.
I was wondering, why do we think CIA needs a Directorate of Science and Technology? Certainly not to just keep up with the latest eavesdropping devices. It's got to be more than that.
Yeah, that's what they like to put forward. And of course, the public eats it up because of the James Bond movies, right? James Bond walks into a room, they've got all these devices that do all this type of stuff, the umbrella that shoots the dart, and the exploding this and that, and the door that opens and bowling ball falls on somebody's head or whatever it is. Yeah, they actually, or the little pack of cigarettes with the camera in it, all these things. They do those things. They actually do those things. The Directorate of Science and Technology, but they also have been leaders in the fields of over-the-horizon radar, which was the precursor to the ionospheric heaters that are today controlling the weather as part of the new Manhattan Project. And they've also been leaders in satellite technology, satellite reconnaissance technology in particular. And satellites play into the new Manhattan Project quite a bit. They're probably observing all the aspects of the weather with satellites that can have probably incredible capabilities that we don't even know about. So, the Directorate of Science and Technology is the most probable place for this project to have evolved within the CIA. And I think it was the CIA. I think the CIA is the most important player in all of this because of so much evidence that indicates their involvement. I'm trying to find the particular paragraph here where I state all these reasons why. But over the course of my research, I have found time and time again that the CIA has extensive experience in many aspects of the new Manhattan Project. Here, I have the paragraph here. They have historically operated large fleets of covertly operating aircraft, such as Air America and Flying Tigers, CAT, different iterations. The CIA has worked extensively on lots of high technology applicable to the new Manhattan Project. They've had a huge influence over the media, which is obviously covering this stuff up. I mean, you search the term chemtrails, And all you see are these articles that just say, oh, look at these nut bags. I mean, can you believe this? They think that planes are spraying things. I mean, that's all you see. I mean, I think the whole topic has really been blacklisted. You used to actually get kind of decent search results. Now, if I search Google or Yahoo News for the term chemtrails, I just get like these articles are like, 3-4 years old and stuff. And it's all this corporate media trash. And also, and we know that the CIA, there's quite a bit of evidence for the CIA having just a tremendous effect upon the media. I mean, that was his whole clique. That was Alan Dulles' whole clique. His brother, John Foster Dulles, was like a media whore. I mean, he just produced endless amounts of articles, and that was who they always hung out with. All these media people were constantly conversing and working with Alan Dulles, his brother, and all these other people from the CIA. William Raborn was head of the CIA, and he looks like to be a big player in this whole thing. He was on the board of directors of LTV Electrosystems, which eventually became E-Systems, which built the first version of HAARP, the world's most powerful, ionospheric heater. And so, it just goes on and on with the CIA here. And I think it's probably the Directorate of Science and Technology. They're on record as working on technologies that are applicable to the new Manhattan Project.
Man, I'll tell you what, it is an amazing network, literally a network. Everything's a network now. Somebody can have a little podcast in grandma's basement there, and it's a network all of a sudden, but that's not a real network. What these guys are doing is a real network. I was looking at the Directorate of Science and Technology here. They have a really interesting logo. There's a circular, of course, but there's a guy pushing on a lever, just on a stick. Give me a lever and I can move the world. Well, that's what this depicts. There's a little triangular looking, well, it's more like, no, it's not triangular at all. It's actually a pyramids with just the edges, for slats to make a stand. No actual full sides, just the shape, the 4 legs. On top of that is a board or a lever, and there's a figure of a man, looks like it was drawn in the 20s, pushing on this thing, and it's about to move the world, which is sitting on top of this board. And it says, Directorate of Science and Technology. And then in letters that are difficult to see, it reads, Targeting Technology Tradecraft. Then as I go down the page, I started looking, I see stuff like ONI. And right next to ONI, there's a little thing here on Wikipedia that says specify. So I realized not everything that WikiLeaks has in print is like absolutely, biblical grade golden nugget truth. But it says here under projects, following the formation of the ONI, the CIA pursued scientific innovation in several areas, including interrogation, aerial imagery, and electronic intelligence, or ELINS. And then there's Project Bluebird, Artichoke, and MK Ultra. And the MK Ultra led to the suicide of Frank Olson, U.S. Army scientist who was given a dose of LSD. They probably didn't bother to tell him he was going tripping before they gave it to him.
Yeah, I found something about Olson. I found something very interesting about Olson. I include a picture of Frank Olson in my paper, The Deep State and the New Manhattan Project, because it was written in David Talbot's book, The Devil's Chessboard, that Frank Olson and another guy named Norman Cornier, I think that's how you say it, they went around the United States spraying biological agents from aircraft and crop dusters. And they were trained in these techniques by Dr. Kurt Blome, director of the Nazis' biological warfare program, oddly.
Oh, my God.
Surprise, surprise.
Whew. Man, working with the rock stars of evil.
Yeah, and while we're at it, let's talk about Frank Wisner and his son, Frank Wisner Jr. They were connected. They were Frank Wisner. Frank Wisner Jr.'s dad was a bigwig in the CIA. Frank Wisner was he handled the CIA investigations of all Operation Paperclip Germans and helped obtain visas for the paperclip scientists. And he was the one who formally accepted Reinhard Gehlen's surrender. And later, as the director of the CIA's Office of Policy Coordination, Wisner was instrumental in the founding of Civil Air Transport. Civil Air Transport is on record. This is a CIA proprietary aircraft fleet. And Civil Air Transport is on record as having performed weather modification over Japan. So you have this guy, Frank Wisner, bigwig at the CIA a long time ago, forming this covert fleet of aircraft, which is one of this Civil Air Transport is one of the logical predecessors of today's chemtrail fleet, which I've written about extensively. And so you have him putting that together. And then you have his, by the way, Frank Wisner Sr., he ended up going crazy and blowing his brains out with his son's shotgun. And his son, Frank Wisner Jr., went on to serve as a U.S. ambassador to Zambia, Egypt, the Philippines, and India. But most curiously, he was the acting Secretary of State. At the time, large-scale domestic spraying operations began in the United States in 1996. Junior, Frank Wisner Jr. I think he likes to be called Frank Wisner II, so I'm going to call him Frank Wisner Jr. In fact, I'll just shorten him, just call him Junior. He's still around. He's got a Wikipedia listing. I mean, this is a dangerous guy.
Is this not just bizarre? It really is. And I'm so happy, really, as disturbing as the information is, I'm so happy that at least for now, we have a pretty free and open internet here. We can look this stuff up and at least get close. Some of it's been masked or some of it's been removed. I ran across some material that's been removed already, but it went back to 2016 and some ranting and raving about the election. And Donald Trump just can't be president, that sort of thing. But that's apparently been scrubbed no matter what search engine I tried to get to it through. But now the question is, Peter, what do we do? I mean, I guess it's better to know where you are than to just be like, where are we? But once we do know where we are, and we know, I believe that we all know exactly where we are. The question now is, what exactly do we do with the knowing of where we are in the grand scheme of things, where we are in the development of technology that can be just with the click of a mouse, or maybe by this time just a flick of a thought. These things can be things can be turned against the human being, either individually or en masse. What do we do with this information? I mean, it's intriguing. It's wonderful to know these things. I'm just wondering, all right, now what?
We got to clean house. We got to clean house. The people have to rise up. They got to take their government back, and that's what's going on. You know, I think that the people who back Trump are correct, and I back Trump, and I love what he's doing. And, you know, other people have different ideas about what's correct for all of us, but in the long run, it doesn't even really matter. Just the fact that you're involved now is the most important thing. You know, 20 years ago, I was impressed with the fact that people just didn't even care. I mean, you know, they just went on about their lives and stuff just got worse and worse. I saw it getting worse, and they just oh, that's just the way it is, you know. But they're not like that anymore, and I think that's a big positive.
I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. Good. Feel better already. I feel better knowing that you just said that, because we have to do something. It's going to be fatal on a broad scale if we just kind of sit on our hands and try and go back to the way it was. There isn't any going back. And
no, we got to do it right now. This is do or die time for the human race, because the technologies that have been developed since the end of World War II probably could rip the entire Earth in half. I'm literally rip the world, our planet, in two. If things keep on going the way that they're going, or at least the way things have been going in recent decades. So we have to, grow a backbone and stand up to the establishment and say no. We've been saying yes way too much. We've been way too compliant with just letting these powerful people collude and have their old boy networks where it's all just complete selfishness and complete rapaciousness and all these things, and I think a large part of it is the communications. We've been empowered with the internet. Of course, there's lots of issues going on there as well, especially with the 5G. But we need to use these technologies to our advantage, and that's what the whole thing is about. Because these technologies, all technology, can be used for good as well, for tremendous good. It just so happens that we have an establishment that is not good at its core, at its very top. I mean, this is an ancient tyranny. We need to unseat this ancient tyranny that's been dominating humanity for thousands of years. And then, sometimes I think to myself, like, why hasn't it already happened already? Come on, Trump, drop the hammer on these guys, But Rome wasn't built in a day, and I know that. I know that when I, think about it a little more, I say to myself, this is the evolution of the human race, and I do believe that this is the final revolution against this ancient tyranny worldwide, and it's just actually an act of desperation at this moment, because the technologies that they've developed can be so catastrophic to us as a species and to our planet that there's no other alternative except for us to unseat this ancient tyranny.
This is a real pedestrian question, probably, Peter. And let's just take the Ayn Rand part out of it. There's no money in a well-ordered, law-abiding society. No money in it at all. And I would add to that, there's also no money in a healthy society. Physically healthy, mentally healthy. We need drugs for the brain, and we need all kinds of corrective actions and surgeries and this and that for people whose, according to the mainstream media, their number one concern is health care. But they're still eating things that make them 300-pounders in about 2 months if they keep eating this stuff. So it's like, no, they're not interested in preserving their health. What they're interested in, it appears, I could be wrong, but it appears, now, what's being sold is, irrespective of what the public really thinks, what's being sold is the government will give you health care. We'll fix what's wrong with you. It's not, we'll help you keep from getting sick. Not as much money in that as there is in fixing things. So this is a long way to the question, which is, do you think these mugs could make as much money doing, if they decided to be good, to turn their evil genius to good and do good things, could they make as much money as doing nefarious things?
No, they won't be good. They will never be good. They're going to go down. They're going to go down with the ship, and we're going to fight them all the way. And the only thing you can do with this establishment is get rid of it. They cannot be converted, in my opinion. There is no point in trying to convert these people. Their brains are wired a certain way. This is generational. The people. There's certain people in this world who just have the mentality that they're here to rule, just like Queen Elizabeth that says that she has a right to rule, and God-given right to rule over. That's what they believe. They are the rule. They believe they're the ruling class. They believe it's their job to tell us, A, B, C, and D. And I doubt that they. And I really don't feel that there's any reforming this establishment. I think it's just time to get rid of them entirely.
Well, what I really meant was, I agree with you, but if they were to reform, would it be possible, just a couple of guys talking here, would it be possible for them to make the amounts of money that they do if they were not doing something that we could broadly classify as evil? That's all I'm asking is, in other words, could they make as much money selling bandages as they could bullets, so to speak?
I doubt it. it's, their whole thing is just based on cronyism and deception and lies and hate. And that's the establishment going back thousands of years. And it's just the people with the best ideas need to be in charge. The people who do the best things, the people who have the best intentions. And I do actually believe that this is coming about. There's a reason why. I don't want to go into it too much, but I think the blockchain, if you're aware of that, I think that's going to have a real transformative effect upon our society, because it provides an immutable record of what people have done, and if you're doing bad stuff, it goes on the record, and that's it, and it's there for everybody to see, and it can be rooted out, and they'll just keep on doing bad stuff, and we'll just keep on pointing it out, and they'll just keep on paying for it. And this is how we right the ship. This is how we turn the world right side up.
Well, I think I missed your point right out of the chute, because when I think of blockchain, I start thinking about Ethereum and Bitcoin and stuff like that. That's not what you're talking about, is it?
Oh, I'd highly recommend looking into the underlying technology to cryptocurrencies, the blockchain. In my opinion, cryptocurrencies are only about 20%, if that, of the entire power of the blockchain. It can be applied to many different things. It can be applied to almost every aspect of our society and provide accountability to almost every aspect of our society, real accountability where we don't even need what you call a trusted third party, like some big bank or something, or some title transfer for your house. The sale of houses is going to become a lot easier. These financial middlemen are about to be cut out almost entirely. Corporations are about to be, especially financial corporations, are about to become a lot more efficient.
It's funny. I was talking about a publication called Foreign Affairs magazine. I remember seeing a couple of them lying around back in the old days. That's another story for another time. So how is the Council on Foreign Relations, what does the Council on Foreign Relations have to do with CIA and the New Manhattan Project and all of this? The CFR, I mean, and next, I suppose, it'll be the Trilateral Commission too, but we'll stick with CFR for now. What part did they play in all of this?
Well, kind of like the geoengineers themselves, it appears that the Council on Foreign Relations is here to sell the project. It appears that they have a public relations operation going on designed to normalize this spraying of substances into the atmosphere. Not only that, but they share an intertwined history with the CIA and Alan Dulles. And we know that John Brennan, the former director of the CIA, spoke at Pratt House, the headquarters of the Council on Foreign Relations, in 2016, advocating for what he called stratospheric aerosol injection. It comes out this, he's giving the talking point out, right? What he was trying to do was change the term that we're all supposed to use from SRM, which would be solar radiation management, to stratospheric aerosol injection. They do this every once in a while just to confuse us. So, with those three things, I started looking more into the Council on Foreign Relations, and you find that the original reason for forming the Council on Foreign Relations was to modify public opinion. They did it initially as a way to soften up the public to the League of Nations. Well, actually, it was after the failure of the League of Nations. They said, hey, we're not having enough of an effect upon the public's opinions as to these things, and they formed the Council on Foreign Relations. Colonel Edward House was instrumental in this, as well as Dulles and his brother John Foster Dulles. And basically the whole crew, establishment CIA types, formed the Council on Foreign Relations in 1921. Yeah, it was after World War I. Anyway, yeah, the Council on Foreign Relations, Dallin Dulles was the president of the Council on Foreign Relations. He had a soundproof room at Pratt House, and he wielded tremendous power from Pratt House. And there were lots of CFR members that have documented connections to the New Manhattan Project. Those would be Glenn Seaborg, Manhattan Project scientist, Alfred Lee Loomis, which he appears to be very instrumental in the evolution of the New Manhattan Project, James Killian, the old president of MIT, Harlan Cleveland spoke in favor of the use of electromagnetic energy to modify the weather many times, James Conant, the old president of Harvard, Lachlan Curry. This was, I think he had something to do with the Flying Tigers. Jerome Wisner, I haven't looked into him too much. There's a book I got to read on him. John von Neumann, I'm going to say it right this time, Neumann. John von Neumann's daughter, Marina von Whitman, her name is Marina von Neumann Whitman. She's currently a member of the CFR, which is quite interesting to me. I need to look into her some more. John Deutsch is a member of the CFR. This guy has a tremendous resume with all types of connections to the New Manhattan Project. Frank Wisner, the aforementioned Frank Wisner, was a member of the CFR. Boeing, Raytheon, General Electric are all members of their corporate council. And oddly enough, they've been going on and on and on about how they need to spray stuff out of planes to save us from global warming. I list all these publications. I must have listed 15 different articles that CFR members had written where they say, hey, global warming's getting out of control here. We're going to have to spray things out of planes like now. I mean, they get pretty demanding in some of these articles. And there were 4 CFR members in particular who, was it 4? I got, let's see, 4 or 5. 5 CFR members in particular who were authors repeatedly of these type of articles. Sometimes they all co-authored together. One of them is named Granger Morgan. I have his bio in the paper, The Deep State and the New Manhattan Project, currently appearing on Activist Post. The other one was a woman named Catherine Reich. I think that's how you pronounce it. Her last name is R-I-C-K-E. Reich, as in the Third Reich?
No, that's R-E-I-C-H.
Right.
Yeah.
But it depends on how you...
Reika.
Oh, you think that's pronounced Reika? R-I-C-K-E?
R-I-C-K-E.
I'm not sure how to pronounce it. I've just seen it written.
Yeah, got to be Reika.
Reika, close enough. Catherine Reika.
If it's German, it's Reika, like Porsche.
Kind of sounds like Reich.
Yeah. Yeah, why not? And I understand that where Reich is concerned, there are 2 ways to spell it. Reich is like an establishment. Reich is a wealth. Now, I'm not a German linguist. However, that is what I've heard, that there's a double spin on R-E-I-C-H. Reich und Reich. So that's just for you,
Okay. She and her cohorts here have been going on and on about how they got to spray us. And then the last 3 of these CFR, she's a CFR member, the last 3 of these CFR members that have been writing these articles endlessly, it seems. Jay Apt, I think this guy was an astronaut. He looks like a psychopath, if you ask me. I got a picture of him in the article. And oddly enough, his online bio from I think the day I submitted the article to my editor at Activist Post, and then to the next day, this online bio that I linked to suddenly got taken down.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so Michael and I at Activist Post, that we just linked to a different online bio, so still got you, Jay. And then this other guy, Frank E. Loy, looks like a member of the Addams family. You get a picture of him, Frank E. Loy, L-O-Y. He's another one of these CFR members talking about how they got to spray us from planes. And then there's this other guy named David Victor, and he looks young and dynamic and so super cool. He's got a big bio, and they all have these bios where they're working for all these different organizations that either have connections to the New Manhattan Project or potentially have connections to the New Manhattan Project. But the juiciest one, the one that everyone wants to know about, is John O. Brennan, the former director of the CIA. As mentioned, he spoke at Pratt House in 1996, advocating for stratospheric aerosol injection.
The fact that he wound up CIA director after voting for the communist candidate in 76, Gus, what's his name?
Gus Hall, yeah.
Yeah, kind of says it all. It does to me. Maybe that's not enough to convict him, but in my court it did.
Right. But Brennan, he may be related to this other guy named James J. Brennan. I don't know. I haven't been able to establish it, but James J. Brennan worked for Civil Air Transport. He was an 8.5% owner in the company. And this is, one of the predecessors of today's chemtrail fleet, as far as I can tell. And not only that, but James J. Brennan was the congressional liaison to something called China Defense Supplies. China Defense Supplies was the company that enabled, the American company that enabled the Flying Tigers. These people who founded China Defense Supplies, once the United States entered the war on the side of China against Imperial Japan, the Rockefellers, most notably Nelson Rockefeller, did tremendous business with these founders of China Defense Supplies, importing drugs into World War II China with a company called the Sidney Ross Company. This was a subsidiary of Sterling Drugs. John O. Brennan says he's from in and around the New York area, and so are the Rockefellers, the Rockefeller Center in Manhattan. So, and not only that, this guy, James J. Brennan, he was a representative for a congressman. He worked for a congressman named John J. Dempsey, who was a New Mexico congressman. And right after the war in New Mexico, they did lots of weather modification work down in New Mexico, and specifically with the General Electric scientists, Langmuir, Vonnegut, and Schaefer, that I've written about extensively. These are the three men from General Electric who launched the scientific era of weather modification after World War II. And they did a lot of work down there in New Mexico, specifically with the University of New Mexico, where John J. Dempsey was I believe he was a trustee. He was a president of the Board of Regents of the University of New Mexico. And not only that, but New Mexico is home to the White Sands Proving Ground, which is where the Operation Paperclip Nazis went and where they detonated the first atomic bomb. So, if John O. Brennan is related to this James J. Brennan, well, then that opens up a whole Pandora's box, doesn't it?
All right. Now, Rockefeller's got to be in there somewhere. Where is he?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I got the goods on Rockefeller big time. Believe me.
Hit me.
There is this guy named Dr. T.L. Walkowitz. I'm getting his information here. This guy, Dr. I think it's T.L. I'm getting him here. He is. Dr. T.F. Walkowitz, Walkowicz. Dr. T.F. Walkowitz was a representative from Rockefeller Family and Associates who became a trustee of the MITRE Corporation in 1968. This was the same year that our good friend Gordon J.F. How to Wreck the Environment McDonald became a trustee of the MITRE Corporation. And if you are a reader of my work, you know that the MITRE Corporation is the most probable administrator of all of the scientific aspects of today's New Manhattan Project.
You're talking about MITRE. You said MITRE, yeah?
MITRE, M-I-T-R-E, MITRE Corporation of Bedford, Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
They were an offshoot of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology Lincoln Laboratory, of course, which has all types of connections to the New Manhattan Project. So the Rockefeller man, T.F. Walkowitz, was a trustee at the MITRE Corporation, and he was a consultant to the production of the aforementioned 1946 Army Air Force report titled War and Weather, where they talk about using atomic energy to control the weather. A Rockefeller man, there he is, a trustee of the MITRE Corporation, inducted the same year as our good friend Gordon J.F. How to Wreck the Environment McDonald.
Oh boy.
Yeah, and then of course all the Nazi connections for the Rockefellers. I mean, they contributed to the Nazi war machine big time.
Well, if those mugs, those luminary families, they're luminous, all right. Those luminary families did not involve themselves deeply in the Nazi machine, then how is it IBM made all those punch cards? People generally don't know that IBM even made punch cards in the 40s, but they did, and they helped the Germans keep up with the people in the camps.
Yeah.
So how could that happen without these extraordinarily wealthy families being involved with them? It couldn't happen.
Oh yeah, I got just one paragraph in the paper about that. I mean, we got IBM, we got General Electric, Rockefeller, Standard Oil, Ford, others. I mostly just mentioned the ones that have connections to the New Manhattan Project, but pretty much all the giants of American industry were involved in the building of the Nazi war machine, and they contributed through their German subsidiaries. They contributed to not the Nazi Party quite a bit. I mean, Ford was famous for this. I mean, Ford in Anthony Sutton's book, Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler, he writes that in the antechamber to Hitler's office, there was a table with a bunch of books on it, and they were almost all written by Henry Ford. The title of Henry Ford's book has been obscured. We know that he wrote a book called The International Jew, but apparently the full title of the book is The International Jew, and it's something about the second part of it is something about how it's a problem and how we solve it, or something like that. I mean, Ford was a big anti-Semite. He received the big award from Hitler. I forget the name of it, but it was the highest civilian non-German award. He sold all kinds of vehicles to the Nazis, and he not only that, but he merged one of his businesses merged with I believe a Nazi-controlled business. There's quite a bit about. I didn't go into Ford too much because I didn't find enough connections to the New Manhattan Project directly to write specifically a section about that. But there is some stuff about Ford in there. DuPont was involved as well. I mentioned them a little bit. Again, I didn't find too much on them. I wanted to keep to the ones that were most central to the building of the Nazi war machine, and ones that had later connections to the New Manhattan Project, those being General Electric and Standard Oil were the two most important ones.
Does Dow Corning ever come up?
The Dow name does pop up in the weather modification literature and other things. I intend to look into them quite a bit more. But again, they seem more like a bit player than anything else. They did just like DuPont. I think they made a lot of or either made a lot of raw substances for the Nazi war effort, or provided IG Farben with the technology to produce things. But it's a matter of record. not only these big industrial companies, but big banks, such as the Manhattan Bank, which eventually merged with the Rockefeller Chase Bank to give us Chase Manhattan Bank today. I think I said J.P. Morgan. This is all the best book to read on all of this is, as I mentioned, Anthony Sutton's book, Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler. I became aware of that book maybe 8-9 years ago, and I just keep on coming back to it. There's so much good information in there. It was based. Sutton was an Ivy League academic. They try to smear him on the internet. Oh, he was a kook. He's racist. Blah, blah, blah. He was an Ivy League academic, a very well respected researcher, and his books, or at least Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler, was based on documents that surfaced during the post-war Nuremberg trials. So this is not, he didn't just make this stuff up. I mean, this is what happened. You see, I read in some of the books about the families that were involved, such as the Rockefellers and the Warburgs and whatnot. You see a lot of stuff how they kind of made up excuses, and they had stories and things like, oh yeah, well that was somebody else. No, we didn't know about it. No, they were using our name and all this type of stuff. Bull. The documents don't lie. Everything else is hearsay. They have all this hearsay in there that they're passing off as fact. The best evidence we have is the documents that surfaced during the post-war Nuremberg trials, and that's what I'm basing my research on as well.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, there it is. I see it right there. 4 volumes, The International Jew by Henry Ford. There's
a second part to that title, something about how it's a problem and how you get rid of them or something like that. I mean, it's really bad. Like I said, it's been largely scrubbed. I mean, with like you were saying earlier, I think it's Google behind scrubbing a lot of things from the internet. I mean, try to find quotes from the original ClimateGate emails. I don't think they're even available on the web anymore. I think, you can probably find them on the deep web. And I read them when they came out at the time. But they don't want you knowing about the ClimateGate emails. They don't want you seeing these guys covering all this stuff up. It's hard to find text of the ClimateGate emails and so many other things. But, still the best information is in books. Thank God people have written books about this that remain the same as they were when they were published, and that information is not going anywhere. The best information still is in books.
Very well said. I couldn't agree with you more. People have actually seen, not often have I heard this, but I have heard it from people saying that they would read an online, like a Kindle book or something, or reading a book online. And some of these people pay attention to what they're doing, so they'll go back and review a little bit. And they'll find that some of the stuff that they just read the other day there is now gone from that book. It's not even there. It's like that part of the book was erased.
Wow.
I'm not sure it was a good idea to put everything on the internet. Everything wasn't put on the internet.
I've seen.
We'll always. Yeah. Go ahead. What?
I've seen video of Cheryl Atkinson. The reporter, like one of the very few good reporters in the mainstream media. Cheryl Atkinson. I've seen video. She made a video of what she was sitting on her typing on her laptop, watching TV, writing an article that apparently the establishment didn't like. And all of a sudden, it's just like the cursor just starts going everywhere and just deleting things, whole blocks of text. Like it just starts videotaping it. It's like, what the hell is this?
Yeah. We spoke with her one time on Caravan, and she said that's what she said. All right.
Okay. Yeah. I saw the video.
That stuff was being erased. She goes, I wasn't holding down the backspace bar, not at all.
Right.
She was just erasing what she wrote. That's funny up to a point, but really more funny strange than funny haha. I don't like it. I don't like the fact that they think that it's okay to do that. Now, this has popped up recently, and that's this Operation Gladio. The first time I heard about it, it was about bombing trains and train stations in Italy, trying to blame it on the communists. But I'm beginning to think that it's been running for a long time. It ran far longer than World War II and the years after. So what about Operation Gladio?
Yeah, Operation Gladio is very interesting in this whole thing. Somebody's written a really great book about Operation Gladio. I think the premier researchers today is somebody named Paul Williams. I've got his book on my shelf right over there. Paul L. Williams. he's written a series of books now. His first one, well, I don't know if it was his first one. I'll just talk about the one I've read. The one I've read is called Operation Gladio, the unholy alliance between the mafia, the CIA, and the Vatican. In his book, he uncovers once and for all that the CIA was running the drugs out of Southeast Asia. They flew the opium out of Southeast Asia using the aforementioned civil air transport. They flew it to ports in Bangkok. They put it on ships of the Sea Supply Company. They shipped it to Cuba, where, along with the most prominent families of the American mob and the Italian pharmaceutical giant called Schiarapelli, or something like that. It's in here. I think it's called Schiarapelli. They turned it into heroin there. Then the mob distributed the heroin to America's inner city ghettos. This was the burgeoning jazz scene, the jazz drug culture heroin scene of the 1950s, of which famous jazz artists like John Coltrane were a part of. You know, he was famously a heroin addict, and there was many others.
Billie Holiday too, I reckon. There
you go. And so they created this whole very profitable drug culture in the 1950s with their heroin racket, and they took the profits from their venture and they laundered the money through the Vatican Bank. And then the money went to the executors of Operation Gladio through the use of Swiss banks. This was how Operation Gladio was funded. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, Paul Williams is the man. I mean, I don't think anybody has laid it out in a book as well as he had. I mean, you look him up on Wikipedia, they don't even talk stuff about him. He is that well respected. You would think that anybody who wrote a book like that would, be immediately just annihilated in the press. They just ignore him. And like I said, even in his Wikipedia, it's incredible. You'd think, Wikipedia is just absolute garbage, if you ask me, and they don't even attack him in there. He has a very impressive resume as a researcher and an academic. He's very well known in academic circles. And so the CIA funded the most heinous acts of terror during Operation Gladio. So I see no reason why they would not use their global narcotics trade today to, at least in part, fund the New Manhattan Project. This has probably been at least partial funding for the New Manhattan Project as it's been developed over the decades.
Now, let me ask you this. Let's just recapitulate a little bit here. How long has this New Manhattan Project been running?
Well, that's a good question. I'm going with the official kickoff of it was when they officially rolled out the scientific era of weather modification in late 1946 with the three scientists from General Electric. I think that they knew that they wanted to use electromagnetic energy to control the weather, but at the time, all they wanted to show the public was dry ice. If you'll notice, in late 1946, when they had the big press explosion with, three scientists from General Electric control the weather. Look, they dumped dry ice out of a plane. That's all you saw in the press. They dumped dry ice. They dumped dry ice. They dumped dry ice. Nobody cares about dry ice, right? That's not going to hurt the environment. This is just like carbon dioxide is what it is. It's harmless. But a few months later, after the press fervor died down, they started spraying silver iodide. If they would have started spraying silver iodide from the beginning, people would have said, well, hold on, wait a second. What are you talking about? You're spraying silver iodide. This has potential bad effects for us, right? So they were hiding something then. So why wouldn't they be hiding the fact that they were thinking about using electromagnetic energy back then as well? the idea that you could control the weather with electromagnetic energy goes back before 1946. I think it was Tesla who originally hypothesized about it and maybe even experimented about it. There's lots about Tesla we don't know. So, in essence, also another way to look at it is, and maybe I'll even go with this more at its core, I think you could say that my definition of the New Manhattan Project is basically the use of electromagnetic energy to control the weather, because today's conventional cloud seeding industry is not part of the New Manhattan Project as far as I could tell. They're just dumping silver iodide to make it rain or suppress hail. That's what they do. I have no evidence of these above board corporations, which are regulated on a state-by-state basis, using electromagnetic energy to control the weather. They may be working in concert with people administering to the New Manhattan Project, but I have not uncovered any evidence to that fact. So, yeah, basically you could say it's the use of electromagnetic energy, and that to control the weather, and that goes back even long before World War II.
I certainly hope these people know what they're doing, because electromagnetic energy is what penetrates us and surrounds us and binds the universe together, as Obi-Wan Kenobi spoke of the Force. It is the Force. Mm-hmm. I don't trust these people to handle this stuff responsibly. Do you? I mean, I really don't. I think it must be God himself that has prevented them from going over the line already, to the point of absolute abject, total human destruction. I don't trust these people fully. Do you think the chain reaction will stop at the uranium, or do you think it'll encompass all known reality? I don't know. Hold on a minute. No, I think we're good. Go ahead. Really? You sure? Pretty sure. Yeah. Okay. They push the button. Mm-hmm. Okay. So all known reality did not, wind up as part of the chain reaction, but at least not that time.
Yeah, like CERN, like they're doing with CERN today. They don't know. I mean, they're just kind of monkeying around with all life on this planet.
All seeking relevance, all trying to be more godlike. And making themselves more Putz-like with every attempt.
You saw that opening ceremony of the CERN, or it was the tunnel in Switzerland. I'm sure you saw that. That's something that's really stuck in my craw over the last few years. It was just absolutely satanic.
Oh, yeah, the insane dance?
Yeah, that was really, that was in your face.
Wow. Seriously, you can't even talk somebody into doing something like that for fun. They have to be serious to do something as ludicrous as what was on display for the world to see. And yet it didn't get as much backlash as I thought it would. It got some attention, but...
you'd say if the mainstream media was worth anything, they would have covered it. It was just completely ignored. Yeah.
Well, you know why that is? It's because CIA is all over mainstream media. They run it.
Right. They do.
Wild, speculative statement. In fact,
not at all. It sounds crazy, and I had heard people say that before I looked into all of it, and it sounded crazy to me. But if you looked into it, there's really not much doubt about it at all. You can see the whole history of it. You see these people in the mainstream media just repeating the exact same words in the exact same order across all networks internationally and everything. They're obviously getting it from the same source. And that source is the CIA.
I think you're right. And I think the ones that actually pull the trigger on this stuff, when you have time, look into the Broadcast Board of Governors and their European counterpart. It's very interesting.
Okay.
They operate, fund, provide tech and personnel for, and content for several over-the-air networks. I don't think it's Voice of America, but it's like Voice America. It's a derivative of some sort. But you never hear anything about them. But they exist, and they don't just sit around. We're a board. We don't do anything. We're just established. That's it. No, they do stuff. And when I saw the part about providing personnel, tech, content, and funding, I thought, gee, you sure don't hear very much about this outfit in any outlet, mainstream or otherwise. You just don't. It's worth looking into when you have time. I think you'll find some good things in it. I mean, not board, but in your investigation.
No, I've seen quite a few organizations that are just super powerful, and people have never heard of them. One that comes to mind is right here in the Bay Area, something called the Association of Bay Area Governments. It appears to me that politicians, local politicians, regional politicians, they just basically take their orders from this group, the Association of Bay Area Governments, and they don't tell anybody about it. It's an NGO. It's not a government group. It's run by their Bay Area Partnership, which is a group of multinational corporations, and they have a .gov email address. Website. The .gov website. They're not a government group. I know for a fact because I've looked at their history, their official history, which came out of themselves. I had to do it, do an interlibrary loan and all that stuff. It was pretty hidden. But, they've created the Association of Bay Area Governments back in the 70s. They created a government group called the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, which is government, which was, something that was passed by the Congress and stuff. They control that group, which is government, but they themselves are not government, but people think they're government, and they're just like super powerful, and most people haven't even heard of them.
I'll tell you, this is really something. And it may seem utterly unrelated to what we've been talking about today, but I don't believe that it is. Mark Zuckerberg is now being declared the face of neocolonialism because of the 700-acre estate he has on one of the Hawaiian Islands. That he's just taken this. There's a big lawsuit going over it. These people that own these little parcels of land, he wants to buy them all up, and they're going, wait, we don't want to develop on them. We don't want to do anything with them. We just don't want you to put them behind your wall, which blocks access to the beach, and we don't want you to own this. The actual Hawaiians who have been here for many generations would like to hold on to this, and you just roll in here with all this dough, and you just think that you can just take over. Mm-hmm. And there's a quote, there's a class of person, and Zuckerberg is a poster child, that have so much money that they distort day-to-day deeds and behaviors, said Wayne Raposo, a London-based corporate lawyer who's a descendant of Manuel Raposo's brother and is helping to coordinate and finance the holdouts' legal fight. And that's real short, but he continued, even if we lose, this has to be fought. I want my nieces and descendants to know that someone thought it was wrong. I want it to be known that it was resisted. But that's the very mentality that these other mugs have, the Rockefellers and all these other names that have come up, and Brennan too. They just believe that because of their, you talk about moral relativism. Their idea of the golden rule is he who has the most gold makes the most rules. Mm-hmm. They live by it. We laugh maybe because it's funny, but we kind of giggle because it's true. And I suppose it's always been this way. There have always been oligarchs in one form or another, but when it comes to playing with the planet itself, not just trying to own a piece of it, but trying to control the world, and to hell with what the inhabitants think, to hell with the way they feel, or the blowback to their health, or the ecology of the planet in distress, notwithstanding, they just don't care. It's nothing more than the seizure of raw power, which, as a matter of fact, is part and parcel to the entire Communist Manifesto. They promise these many things. They produce these wonderful products, but in the end, all of this stuff, everything they do is in furtherance of seizing raw power. And if you challenge them over it, they'll use it on you, and they do all the time. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's just the way of the world, but I certainly don't believe that it's not something that cannot be moderated, if not eliminated. You know?
We've been ruled by generational sociopaths and psychopaths.
Well, Peter, this is almost like a bloodline curse. And rather than try and get rid of the curse, they embrace it and roll with it. It seems to be literally, and it is literally, carried through the bloodline, generation after generation, doing these things. Let me ask your opinion on something. How do you think it is if various families that we have all known have trouble with a kid that doesn't want to do what he or she is told? They want to go make guitars in Colorado rather than run the multinational corporation over here, that kind of thing. How do these families keep such tight control over their descendants in order to keep the corporations and these big machines of global power running? What do you reckon is the method that they use? Threats of death, or is it so much in their blood that it's like they don't even have to worry about that? They know that the son is going to come right after the father and carry on in the family tradition of control. What do you think?
Well, it's probably, you know, if one of their descendants doesn't just come forward and assume the leadership role, then they have to pressure one of their descendants into that role. That's probably how it works. That would be my assumption.
Well, look at what happened to old DuPont. Remember when he went crazy and killed his personal trainer? I don't know what happened to him after that. He might have wound up in a mental hospital, but you remember some years ago, the heir to the DuPont throne just murdered the hell out of his friend and personal trainer.
That story rings a bell. I'm actually really not super familiar with it. There was a book written about the DuPonts. I had to just scan over it because I was looking for information pertaining to the New Manhattan Project, but it was written by one of my favorite authors, Leonard Mosley. Are you familiar with Mosley? I've
heard the name. I may even have read some of the work. It doesn't come to mind at this moment.
Yeah, he seems to just be writing, or he's dead now. He wrote back in the 50s and 60s and stuff. But he seems to have been, he was writing about the same families that I've been keyed onto as well. He wrote a biography of Goering, Hermann Goering, the Reichsmaster, was that what they called him? You know, number 2 guy in Nazi Germany. And it was one of the best books I had ever read. And he also wrote a book about the DuPont family, which I have on my bookshelf. Scanned through it, like I said, didn't find a whole lot pertaining to the New Manhattan Project. I would have liked to have read more closely the whole thing. He also wrote a book about the Dulles family. So I look forward to reading that one. I'm going to read a little more closely. That one, I'm looking at it right now. It's over there on my bookcase, big thick thing. But certain authors just kind of key in on the same things that you and I key in on, and it's not like we're making this stuff up. We're all looking at the same truth. We're all looking at the same object.
Well, you've been very generous with your time, Peter. I appreciate it. What's Peter Kirby's message to the world as of today?
Please go to my website, peterakirby.com. Please join my email list, and please buy my book, Chemtrails Exposed, the New Manhattan Project. It's available on Amazon.
All right. Chemtrails Exposed, a New Manhattan Project.
Yes, the second edition should be out by the end of this year. What I'm going to do is just go read all the stuff that I have left over, and then maybe do a few more interlibrary loans, maybe buy like 20 more books on Amazon, like key books. I could buy hundreds of more books to read for the second edition, but I think I want to get the second edition out and just get some real prime, more information in there. There's going to be a lot of unreleased, unpublished stuff in there. I'm always sitting on new information. I only put information out when it's appropriate to do so. Don't hesitate. If you bought the first edition of the book, don't hesitate to buy the second, because there's going to be a lot of unpublished stuff in there, and it's going to be a more cohesive whole. I'm going to be putting all the articles that I've published since the publication of the first edition. Those are all going to go into the second edition, and then, like I said, there's going to be a lot more information that is previously unpublished as well.
Well, I pray that the Lord will continue to protect you, because when you go out there on the clothesline, as you have, you know, with this kind of material, publishing a book and putting your name on it and everything like that, you know, there's a potential for some blowback there, but that doesn't seem to worry you. So all I can do is commend you for it, and thank you very much for it. And,
you know, I think that a lot of good guys in positions of power, particularly in the military and in the intelligence agencies and stuff, I think a lot of good guys in our government have been empowered recently, and you know, I think that they're using the tools that the bad guys used to be using against us. I think a lot of good guys are using tools to protect people like me and you now. So, you know, a lot of people don't like Trump, whatever. I love Trump, and I think that the people who love Trump are going to protect me as well. I thank God that we have a good guy in the most powerful position in the world right now. I thank God every single day, because if you had Hillary Clinton in there, it'd just be absolutely open season on people like you and me.
I agree with you 100%. I really do. And I like Mr. Trump too very much. I pray for him with probably monotonous regularity, but I do. And, you know, he drives these insane and frankly evil leftists. He drives them just crazy. And the crazier he drives them, the more they reveal themselves to be exactly what he says they are, and exactly what we have long suspected they are. And rat them out for it every day in hopes that maybe they will just, I don't think they'll ever really go away, but maybe they'll get off the stage for a while. And then hopefully we won't get so soft after everything has been repaired and settled, that soft chair makes us lazy, and they wind up resurging once again, so that we have to tamp it down and beat them back again. It's too bad that we can't just beat them back once and for all, but that is the nature of evil. Here we are on planet Earth, and we know who runs planet Earth, don't we?
Yeah, you know, this liberal theology has a place in our society, but in my opinion, it has a very small place. It should have a very small. It's like the arsenic in the apple. It should be a very tiny fraction of a healthy society. Instead, it's just taken over everything. And you know, I think that a lot of weak minds have usurped the role of the intellectual. You have these weak minds, people who don't understand anything, coming forward with these assertions about how they know how everything should be run, and you know, and all this type of stuff. They don't know anything. They know squat. And you know, it's like our world has been turned upside down. I like the example of LeBron James. Here's the guy who's best at stuffing a ball through a hoop, and then he puts on glasses and grows a beard and wears a suit, and all of a sudden he's an intellectual.
Right.
I mean, this.
Yeah, well, I put on a mask and suddenly I'm Kunta Kinte. So who cares? We know these people for what they are. You're good at bouncing the ball around and making scores, then good for you. If you can make a lot of money doing it, more power to you.
Right.
But don't try and convince everybody that you're a genius.
Right.
Because you're not.
Right.
I can't resist asking this question, because I've got a pretty good idea the nature of the answer, and that is, what do you make of this Ocasio-Cortez?
I was just thinking about her. I think she's going to effectively wreck the Democratic Party. I mean, more power to her. I mean, she's really not that smart at all. She's dumb, if you ask me.
Yep.
She knows nada.
Every time they open their mouths, it looks worse.
Yeah, I mean, go with her, please, Democrats. Go with her, yes, please. You know, her and Maxine Waters and that other crazy lady, the Muslim or whatever. You know?
Well, we already put the Caravan stamp of disapproval on her, so we'll let the stamp sit, and we'll just let her run her course and see how much damage she can do to.
I think that's exactly what Trump is doing.
Yeah,
in his last press conference, he said, "I think they've gone crazy." I don't know if you saw that one. And you know, and he's just watching them just destroy themselves. I mean, they are absolutely divided, the Democrats at this point. I mean, you got the establishment Democrats who just are like the deer in the headlights, like Nancy Pelosi. They don't seem to know what to do. You got this Ocasio-Cortez and the rest of them, you know, thinking that there's part of some insurgents or something, and they're going to go absolutely nowhere. And, meanwhile, you got the media saying the Republicans are divided. The Republicans are united. The old blue blood Republicans have been flushed out. That happened during the last election. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. The latest thing from that woman is Medicare and free tuition for all. Those two words have made a big comeback. For all.
No.
Yeah. Free tuition.
Of course, she doesn't ask the question who's going to pay for it. But...
Well, of course. Well, those people who are making just obscene amounts of money. But I bet you it won't be Zuckerberg who winds up getting taxed at 70%.
Uh-huh.
No. You know what they say. The little thieves get hanged. The big thieves, they get elected to political office. So that's just kind of how it is. But that's why you're here on planet Earth in this particular era. And I'd like to think that's the reason I'm here on planet Earth in this particular era. So, I think we'll win eventually. At minimum, we'll get even. And even if it's a get even situation, they're definitely going to know that they've been in one. There'll be a lot of slinking back to the cave and licking of wounds after that. So hopefully this civil war that they seem to be, they on the left seem to be really wanting. Oh man, lately I've been talking about my opinion that's entirely possible. But the reason they keep slinging all this vitriol is that they really want some harsh blowback, physical, violent blowback from the right, so they can say, see the horrible right-wing monster.
We don't do that. We don't do that. We don't. We believe in America. We know the bones. We know the great bones that America has, and we're going with that. We have faith in God. We have faith in America. They don't. They say that they're patriots. They aren't really.
That's beautiful. All right, let's reconvene in the not too distant future. As soon as that, the second edition is due to come out one more time. When?
I'm hoping by the end of the year.
Okay. Well, look, that's a long time to wait. So let's talk before then. Anything new that comes up that you want to spread the word on, please sing out to us if we haven't sung out to you already, and we'll get together again in the not too distant future. All right.
Great, John. I really appreciate that invitation.
I appreciate you accepting it. So God bless and stay safe out there. All right.
Yes, sir.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, some of this stuff sounds pretty wild, doesn't it? The thing is that it's absolutely, completely real. It really is. This thing about international Jew. Well, guess what? You can't get it at Amazon.com, but there was a copy available at Amazon.ca. So you can get it from Canada. You just can't get it from the States. These things that Peter Kirby and people who are doing work not unlike his, they come up with these things that are stunning. You can't believe it. Unfortunately, it's true. And the most unfortunate part about it is going to be felt by those who have been perpetrating it, because all of this stuff is being revealed. It's written right there in Scripture that nothing that is hidden will be permanently concealed. All will be revealed. And ever since, coincidence or otherwise, but ever since 12/21/2012, when the Mayan calendar came to an end, it's been nothing but revelation after revelation after revelation. And I don't think this really has anything to do with it, but it is an interesting coincidence that the earthquakes are popping off. The magnetic pole is moving from Canada towards Siberia to 55 kilometers per year or something. And every day there's a different and new revelation about some institution, some individual, some component of our 21st century life that we trusted, we got used to. It was kind of a societal staple. Been revealed to be involved in things that we could not imagine any organization, agency, company, corporation, or otherwise would ever have been involved in. We can't believe it, but we must believe it. It is their stock and trade. It is the stock and trade of the great deceiver, the father of lies, to twist and pervert everything. So, remember it. That is why I say, if these things interest you, don't take my word for it. Don't take Peter's word for it. Look into it yourself. Satisfy yourself that this is true. or I have questions. If it's of interest to you, then just tell yourself, I'm doing this because it's important to me to do it. And then pass on the results of your research to somebody who's willing to listen. And from them, they'll pass it on to somebody, and so on and so on. And we might actually be able to salvage the civilization. You know, like that campy little movie, Mortal Kombat, 7 people on the leaky boat are going to save the world. Something like that. God bless.